Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving into the incredible, and kinda gross, story of how 19th century Britain went from a nation literally drowning in its own filth to a pioneer of modern sanitation. And it all happened thanks to the work of three remarkable individuals.
Okay, so let's just paint a picture here. We're talking about the early 1800s. Britain's industrial towns are exploding in size, but they are absolutely deadly places to live. Thousands of people are crammed into these slums with zero proper drainage, no sewers, and no clean water. The rivers, which should have been sources of life, were basically open sewers. It was a disaster.
Now, for decades, the biggest thing stopping anyone from fixing this crisis wasn't a lack of money or technology. It was a complete misunderstanding of how disease works. Just about everyone believed in something called the miasma theory, the idea that diseases like cholera were spread by bad smells and foul air. So as long as officials were just trying to fight the smells, the real killer was being totally ignored.
So who's the first person to really take this on? Well, it was a social reformer named Edwin Chadwick. And what's interesting is, he wasn't a doctor, but his work was about to change public health forever.
See, Chadwick's job was to figure out how to cut the cost of the poor law. That's the system for helping the poor. But as he dug into it, he had this huge aha moment. People weren't poor because they were lazy. They were poor because they were constantly sick from living in these absolutely horrific conditions.
In his landmark 1842 report, he dropped a bombshell statistic. There was a 20-year gap in life expectancy. A worker in a city like Liverpool could expect to die around age 19, while someone doing the same work in the countryside might live to 38. Think about that. The industrial city had become a death trap.
But Chadwick knew that numbers alone wouldn't be enough. So he filled his report with these vivid, gut-wrenching descriptions of what life was actually like. He wanted to force the ruling class, who were totally disconnected from this reality, to see what was happening. He made the problem impossible to ignore.
And here's the really brilliant part. Chadwick framed the whole solution in economic terms. He didn't just make a moral argument. He appealed to their wallets. He argued that public health was all about productivity. A healthier workforce means a richer nation. And he said it was the government's duty to provide the basics, like drainage, sewers, and clean water.
His report was a game changer, and it led to Britain's first ever Public Health Act in 1848. This was a huge step forward, but it had a fatal flaw. The act was permissive. That meant it allowed local councils to make improvements, but it didn't force them to. And with the whole laissez-faire attitude of the time, guess what most of them did? Yep, nothing.
So Chadwick had kicked things off, but Britain's towns were still incredibly dangerous. And then cholera, this terrifying epidemic, came roaring back.
While most doctors were still pointing their fingers at miasma, one physician, a Dr. John Snow, was skeptical. He just wasn't buying it. So he decided to investigate a massive cholera outbreak in London's Soho district, but he did it with the meticulous eye of a detective.
Snow's method was totally revolutionary for the time. He didn't just sit in an office and theorize. He hit the streets and collected data. He made a map, and he marked where every single person had died. And what he found was that the deaths all clustered around one specific water pump on Broad Street. He even tracked down cases of people who lived miles away but had water from that specific pump delivered to them. He finally convinced the local authorities to take the handle off the pump, and just like that, the outbreak stopped.
This was a massive shift in thinking. Snow had provided the first real, hard, scientific evidence that cholera was a waterborne disease. The enemy wasn't some vague bad air, it was something specific, something physical, in the drinking water.
Okay, so Chadwick had identified the problem, and Snow had proven the cause. But London still needed a huge, practical solution. And as it turns out, it would take a major crisis to finally make it happen.
You can't make this up. In the scorching hot summer of 1858, the River Thames, which was basically a giant open sewer, got so foul that the stench was unbearable. They called it the Great Stink. And the smell was so powerful that it overwhelmed the Houses of Parliament, which are right on the riverbank. Suddenly, the politicians had to act, not just for the public's health, but so they could breathe in their own offices.
The person they put in charge of this epic task was an engineer named Joseph Bazalgette. He designed this incredibly ambitious network of intercepting sewers. We're talking huge, brick-lined tunnels that would catch all the waste and carry it far, far away from the city before it could get into the Thames. It was truly one of the greatest engineering projects of the entire century.
And the results? They were absolutely staggering. As you can see, once Bazalgette's system was up and running, deaths from diseases like cholera just plummeted. The sewers didn't just get rid of a bad smell, they literally saved thousands and thousands of lives.
All of this work was building towards a total transformation for the country. The combined efforts of these three guys, the crusader, the detective, and the builder, completely changed Britain's entire way of thinking about public health.
This all led directly to the hugely important Public Health Act of 1875. The key difference, as you can see, comes down to one little word: compulsory. No longer could councils just decide to do nothing. Now they were legally required to provide clean water, proper drainage, and sewers. The government had finally, officially accepted its responsibility.
So when you look back, you see it really took all three of them. You had Chadwick, the crusader, who made the moral and economic case for why this had to be done. You had Snow, the detective, who gave them the scientific proof of what was causing the disease. And then you had Bazalgette, the builder, who engineered the incredible physical solution. Together, their work laid the very foundation for the public health systems that we all rely on today.
Their story is just such a powerful reminder of how ideas, hard evidence, and incredible engineering can come together to solve problems that seem completely impossible. And it kind of leaves you with a question, right? What are the vast unseen systems built by modern-day pioneers that are silently protecting our health right now without us even knowing it?